Hello, listeners, and welcome back again. Or if you're new, welcome, welcome. I am your host, Annika, and on this episode of Between Two Worlds, we are pulling back the veil on Baneful Magic, the shadowed side of spellwork that so many fear, avoid, or misunderstand. I want to unpack the stigma around baneful practices, explore the philosophy and ethics behind them, and ask why is protection powerful and why is saying no so sacred? Um, Specifically on more of a personal front in the second half of the episode, I'm going to be sharing my own cord cutting journey, how I'm using magic to create distance and boundaries with family, and what it feels like to grieve, release, and reclaim your space all at once. So, this episode is not directly pointed to hexing and jinxing and baneful magic in that kind of sense. But if you're someone who feels like this needs to be integrated in your life somehow when it comes to close and personal relationships, well, I hope that you can gain something at least from it, from me sharing my own story. This episode is a spell of sovereignty, a kind of a permission slip of your own protection, and a reminder that not all endings are curses and some are doorways. There is kind of a silence that surrounds Baneful Magic, right? It's the kind of silence that says, we don't talk about that. Even in witchy spaces, even among practitioners who work with spirits and deities and death, the moment the words hex, curse come up, the energy shifts. People are tense, and that fear, that discomfort, it comes from something deeper than just misinformation. Honestly, I believe it comes from centuries of being told that anything powerful must be dangerous, that protection is aggression, that drawing a line is cruel, that to say enough, especially with magic behind your voice, makes you a villain. But here's the thing, the very core, I believe Baneful Magic isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity. It feels good to release emotion, good or bad, and we need both. But the reason for that release of anger, hurt, despair is really just for the fog to go away and for the path to become clear. It's about protection, boundaries, and survival. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that have been shamed into silence, especially the parts that know when something needs to end. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about baneful work, what it is, why it holds such a heavy stigma, and why there is nothing to be afraid of when your magic comes from intention, not reaction. But, however, we can bottle up those reactions and the immediate emotion to charge our spells and workings. And later in the episode, I'm going to share something pretty personal. I know that at least when I listen to other podcasts, it's nice to connect to the person on the other end on a more personal level. It just makes things a little bit more special. Because really, I'm in the middle of somewhat of a cord cutting process with someone in my own family. And yes, it's painful and it's necessary. And I know I'm not the only one going through something like this right now. So if this episode is for you, if you've ever felt like protecting your energy made you a bad person, um, if you've been afraid to cast a boundary that sticks, or if you've ever whispered, I'm done, and wondered if your magic was still valid when it came from pain, this is your permission to explore the shadow with open eyes and an open heart. So let's begin with what baneful magic actually is. Because a lot of people think it means lighting black candles to hex your enemies just because you're in a bad mood. And while yes, black candles might be involved, baneful magic is not about petty revenge or random chaos. It may seem that way, but deeply it is intentional, it's precise, it's rooted in necessity, and should only be used if necessary. Don't get me wrong, I am extremely hex positive. Being a practicing witch for 10 years, this is something that I am not afraid to talk about or perform. But I think being a witch is more than just spell work. It is about the personal growth, it's about the mindset, the constant striving for the next step. It is an evolution of, well, your soul, your thinking, your mind. Ideally, we should be in a place where we can see past the anger and realize actions in other places can give us really the same results as they will with nasty magic. But Nasty magic has its place, don't get me wrong, and it can be quite fun. As a user of magic and manipulator of energies, you really get to have this pleasure. After all, balance is key. So, Baneful Magic is any kind of spell work designed to create distance, stop harm, return energy, or even sever a connection. It can look like cord cutting rituals after months or years of emotional entanglement. It can be a mirror box to return someone's projection back to them. It might be a freezer spell to silence someone's gossip, a poppet stuffed with protective herbs, a banishing sigil, a binding. It's not about cursing for sport. It's about energetically saying, this ends here. The thing with some people who might give off more than what they actually have in their arsenal is that they throw curses willy-nilly and hexes and jinxes and they're like, oh, I'm a big bad witch. This is what I do all the time. But really, the energy is quick, right? People who do those sort of things, it fires off quick, it hits quick, it also dies quick. It is not potent. It is like throwing a bunch of those little ground poppers you get at the fireworks stand instead of placing the mortar exactly in the right spot. Some baneful workings are loud, some are quiet, some are for protection, for release, but all of them come from a sacred place. Your right to feel safe in your own body, your own home, and your own spirit. And here's the thing, Baneful Magic isn't new. It's woven through folklore and folk traditions all over the world. Our ancestors didn't have the luxury of love and light only, because if you haven't gathered the theme by now in my podcast, love and light is bullshit. So, they protected themselves with, for example, iron nails, ashes, red thread, or dirt and fire. They cursed to survive in certain scenarios. They bound to protect what was theirs. They worked with the land, the bones, the spirits, and they didn't ask for permission. They worked with it. We live in a time where many of us have been disconnected from that ancestral knowing. We were told to protect ourselves, that was selfish, that we should always forgive, always stay soft, always endure. But Baneful Magic says you don't have to keep the door open to what is harming you. Sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for yourself is to say no. And sometimes the most powerful spell you can cast is the one that ends the cycle. So why is it that even in magical spaces, even among the seasoned witches, Baneful Magic is still something that makes people nervous? It's fear. Deep-rooted, culturally conditioned fear, and not just any fear. It's fear shaped by centuries of religious doctrine, fear of damnation, fear of power. You've heard me say it time and time again on this podcast. Fear is something that everyone has a hard time coming over, and it controls a lot more than we think it does. Because for a very long time, we were taught that anything painful, anything forceful, anything that disrupted the status quo was evil. The church told us that to harm was to be damned, that to protect ourselves was to play God, that to seek justice outside of divine permission was a sin. This dualism, this obsession with good versus evil, it just runs deep. It made its way into the collective psyche. So when a witch says, I did a binding spell, people flinch. Not because they understand what that means, but because they've been taught that anything that causes change with force must be bad. And it adds to the stigma of the witch itself. Even if you no longer identify with the religion you were raised in or never considered yourself religious at all, you may still feel the shadow of its teachings when you reach for baneful magic. The truth is, the harm that religious structure has given on the world and society is not always personal. It has influenced the world as a whole, and you can feel that, whether it is something that was directly aimed at you while you grew up or not. The fear doesn't always show up as doctrine. It shows up as guilt, as hesitation, as the voice that says, "Are you sure this isn't wrong?" It shows up in the shame that flares when you think about protecting yourself, and in the belief that to be spiritual, you must always be kind, forgiving, and endlessly open. But these ideas didn't come from the craft. They came from some systems that equated goodness with obedience, and obedience with survival. Systems that told us to turn the other cheek, to stay in the light, to renounce our anger as unholy. These are the same systems that silenced witches, burned seers, and demonized the ones who refused to bow. So when you practice Baneful Magick from a place of clarity, you are not stepping into evil. You are stepping out of spiritual repression. You are refusing to continue the cycle of self-erasure so that many of us were raised in. You are saying, I choose myself, and that itself is sacred. You're not bad for protecting your peace. You are not unspiritual for needing distance. You are not broken for wanting to feel safe. But honestly, if we really think about it, most Baneful Magick doesn't even cause harm, right? It causes separation, it causes closure, and it causes consequences. And for people who have benefited from your silence, your lack of boundaries, or your spiritual softness, that can feel threatening. Because when you work banefully, you're saying, I trust myself enough to defend my peace. You are stepping out of the role of the endlessly forgiving, self-sacrificing healer and into the role of the protector, the boundary setter, the one who chooses themselves. And that's where another layer of fear creeps in, internalized guilt. A lot of us sit with this when we first enter the realm of Baneful Magick. What if I bring bad karma? What if it rebounds on me? What if this makes me a quote bad witch? But let me ask you this. Who gave you the definition of a good witch? Was it someone who benefits from you always choosing the high road? Was it someone who told you that softness is the only path to enlightenment? Was it someone who feared that you'd become what you would become if you stopped playing nice? Fear of Baneful Magick is often just fear of power. Fear of being seen as too much, being called dangerous, what it means to choose yourself, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Baneful Magick isn't always about punishment, it's about perspective. It's about choosing to stop cycles before they consume you. And it's about recognizing when something or someone is no longer aligned with your well being and having the spiritual authority to act on it. So let's talk about morality, because that's often the first thing that comes up when we talk or start exploring Baneful Magick. So many of you will ask, is it ethical to curse someone? Is it wrong to bind another person's energy? What about the law of threefold return or karma? Will it come back to me? And my answer is always this. Ethics in witchcraft are not universal. They're personal, contextual, self-determined. Unlike religion, the craft doesn't hand us a static list of what is right and what is wrong. There's no commandment carved in stone that tells you when to walk away and when to strike. There's just you, your spirit, your intuition, your ancestors, and your discernment. And yes, that can feel pretty scary, but it's also powerful as fuck because it means you're not following someone else's rule book, you're writing your own. You're not bound by fear or eternal punishment, you're guided by what feels aligned, necessary, and true. So I say let's shift the conversation. Instead of asking, is this bad? Maybe ask, is this aligned with my values? Because sure, it might be bad, but really, who gives a fuck? If your values align, then go for it. Instead of asking, maybe, will this come back to bite me? Ask, am I being clear, intentional, and maybe spiritually accountable? If you give your magic the power to come back and bite you, quite honestly, then you need to get a hold on your magic before you even begin this type of workings. For some witches, baneful work is only used in rare, extreme situations when all else has failed. For others, it's more or less a natural part of their protective practice, done without shame or apology. There's no right answer. There's just your answer. Personally, when we start to think about applying this type of magic to ones who have been close to us or who are literally close to us like family, even though we may need to do the right thing, which is the hard thing, I believe this. You can curse with love, you can curse and hex with clarity. You can sever a cord and still hold space for grief. You can protect yourself and still be healing. And yes, intention matters, but not in the shallow, just be positive way. Intention matters because your magic should come from a place of clarity, not chaos, from discernment, not desperation, from truth, not fear. Remember that you must be able to channel that chaos energy, however. that anger and those emotions for a working like this to be effective and most useful to you, but you cannot perform these magics in a clouded headspace. You cannot be rattled with these emotions. You have to learn how to wield them. It might be one of the hardest things, honestly, about baneful work is finding that line and drawing it, but and then you need to stay behind it. Use a tag lock, use something to capture and keep the energy that you feel in the heat of the moment. That moment that you want the fucking world to burn and you are so fired up, you want to hex them right then and there. Don't. But you must take that energy because it is as potent as fuck and keep it in a safe space for later. That is what is now a part of your arsenal, just like your herbs, just like your nails, just like your waters, just like any other magical materia. If you bottle this energy up, it is just as important. This is where you take the dog back out of the cage and then direct that same energy in your working, but you need to have come to a space by then where you know that the working end is necessary. And if you're not there yet, that's okay. Take your time, ask the hard questions, sit with your shadows. You don't have to rush into baneful work to prove your power, but you also don't have to reject it to prove your goodness either. You are allowed to draw lines, you are allowed to define your own morality, and you're allowed to protect yourself spiritually, energetically, emotionally, without asking for anyone else's permission. So, as I said before, I want to shift on to something much more personal now, because I'm not just talking about baneful magic in theory. I'm kind of working through it right now in my own life, specifically with someone very close to me. And I know I'm not the only one, or maybe in the future won't be. I don't know. I'm sure there's someone out here who can relate to this. Um, so recently, I've been going through a process of cutting cords with family. And if you've ever had to do that, you already know it's not easy. There's grief, even when the choice is clear. There's guilt, even when the harm has been repeated. And there's still a voice that says, but they're family. Especially if you come from a family who have constantly instilled that in you. Uh, the culture, well, on both sides of my family are very much like that, just from geographically where we're from. It's just kind of in the culture. Your family always comes first. And well, fuck, when they got your back, they got your fucking back. And personally, in this case, I'm not talking about to that extent, but when things are more complicated than that. Family doesn't give someone a free pass to harm you. Blood doesn't give someone a permanent key into your spiritual home. I have gone through a certain process with a number of people in my family this way, but I think it's time for one of the hard ones. And for a long time, I tolerated too much. I honestly swallowed my anger. I let the phone calls keep coming, the drama fill my cup when I didn't even ask for more, even if I didn't engage. And I thought that those walls were there. I slowly began to realize that there was a problem with those walls. They were just still not enough. It still affects me. I told myself, just be patient, just be kind. I honestly played the role of the forgiving one, the understanding one, and ultimately the spiritual one. By now, my family knows how I work, and I do have patience. I have patience that can reach the moon, but when it runs out, shit can hit the fan, and honestly, I do not hold back on any front. But here's what I've learned. Being spiritual doesn't mean being endlessly available. Being magical doesn't mean being boundaryless. You cannot help someone who doesn't want the help. The moment I began to realize that I was giving what was not being even considered, but that the cycle of their own torment was slowly drawing me in and down with it, that is when I decided I have had enough and that my own temporary walls were not enough. I needed to do something more. And healing doesn't mean letting someone stay in your life just because they share your DNA. You cannot ask someone to change. You can only watch them leave the opportunities that they are given to change behind. And then it will become clear to you that the power of the situation is held within you and not them. So there came a point where I could feel it in my body, this thick, sticky energy that wouldn't move. I don't know about you guys, but I have always manifested emotion physically through my body. It is a dangerous thing, but fuck, it is really loud when you learn to listen. I like seriously get physically ill. Every time I thought of them, I felt drained. I felt disoriented, tight in my chest. That's how I knew the cord wasn't just emotional, it was energetic and it had to go. So I begun kind of a ritual, a sort of cord cutting, not to curse them, not to harm them, but to free myself. It is not a traditional cord cutting in a sense, and I will not share the details too intensely because of obvious reasons for my magic, my spirits, and etc. But if you're listening right now and wondering if you're at that point, if you've reached the edge, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You don't have to wait for the breaking point. You don't have to wait for the next betrayal, the next dismissal, and the next time they twist your words and leave you in a puddle of self-doubt. Sometimes the moment you realize the relationship requires you to shrink in order to survive it, that's the sign. Sometimes it's when you find yourself rehearsing how to speak, filtering your truth, silencing your spirit to keep the peace. Sometimes it's in your body, the dread in your stomach when the phone rings, the jaw that tightens when they enter the room, the deep fatigue after every interaction. These are signs, they are sacred data. Your body is not betraying you, it is trying to lead you to freedom. And the truth is, separations from family can feel more intense than any other kind of ending. Not because the love is stronger, but because the programming is. The narrative that says they're blood, you owe them loyalty. It is so deeply rooted, it becomes eternal law. But blood is not a contract. Shared genetics does not mean shared values, and someone being your parent, your sibling, your cousin, that doesn't mean they're entitled to your energy, your forgiveness, or your presence. Separation doesn't always mean screaming and slamming doors. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's one final boundary that you know won't be respected. Sometimes it's the stillness that comes after years of chaos and the grief that says, I finally understand they are who they are and I can't keep hoping they'll change. That moment, it's sacred. If you're there, or even just nearing it, I want you to know your pain is valid. Your longing is valid, your decision, whatever it may be, it's all valid. Let yourself feel all of it. And when you're ready, when it's time, know that your magic can carry you through it. The ritual, the herbs, the cord, the fire, the words that you speak, they're not just symbolic. They have, real tools for pain, for real pain. And you are allowed to use them. So if you're in that space and if you're standing at the edge wondering if it's time to cut a cord, this is me reaching out and saying you are not alone. You are not selfish. You are not a bad witch for wanting space. Your peace is worth the ritual. Your energy is worth protecting. Your future is worth choosing, even if that means saying goodbye. And maybe for you, it's not a full cut. Maybe you're not ready or don't want to completely remove someone from your life. Maybe the bond is complicated, layered, full of both love and harm. That doesn't make your experience any less real. That doesn't mean you still can't protect your spirit. Painful work doesn't always mean total exile. Sometimes it means energetic distance while still sharing space. It means warding your aura before family gatherings, placing protective sigils on your clothes or your jewelry. It means cleansing after phone calls, speaking less, revealing less. It means shifting that dynamic magically, even if nothing looks different on the surface. This is the quiet kind of protection, the subtle spellcraft, the sacred pause between what they expect and what you now choose to give. You can write their name on a slip of paper and freeze it, not to punish them, but to maybe pause their influence. You can create a boundary jar filled with herbs and objects that say, you stay there, I stay here. You can call your energy back after every interaction. You can speak their name into the wind and say, you don't get to cross this line anymore. You don't have to wait for permission to do this. You don't have to explain your craft. You don't have to justify the way you care for your energy. This is just how you keep your magic alive in the liminal spaces. When you're not ready to leave, but you are ready to change everything. So, how do you know when it's time? When is the pain no longer just a passing ache, but a signpost? When is the moment no longer about holding on, but letting go? The truth is, there's no single answer, no dramatic threshold. Often it arrives quietly. After one too many conversations that leave you feel drained, after one too many moments where you realize you are censoring your magic, your truth, and yourself just to keep the peace. Maybe it's when you start dreading every message from them, when your voice gets smaller around them, when every visit takes 3 days to energetically recover from. It's when they look you in the eyes and still can't see you. If you're constantly negotiating your worth, if your craft, your awareness, your boundaries, your beliefs are under quiet attack, if you're shrinking in the name of keeping the family together, that might be your sign. Choosing yourself doesn't always look fierce. Sometimes it's quiet decision not to explain anymore. Sometimes it's not texting back right away. It's the sacred boundary of a closed door and a lit candle. You don't need a dramatic fight to justify your separation. You don't need to be in crisis to take your power back. You just need to know deep in your bones that you are worth choosing. Because the more you choose yourself, the clearer your magic becomes, your intuition sharpens, your protection strengthens, your peace roots deeper. And no matter what happens, you are allowed to be your own home. You are allowed to belong to yourself. That's the core of baneful work. Not destruction, but discernment. Not punishment, but preservation. Not cruelty, but clarity. It's the knowing that you no longer owe your pain to anyone. You owe yourself the freedom. So, if you've made it this far, I want you to know that this episode wasn't just information. It was a spell for the ones who are tired of being told that their softness is the only sacred thing about them. A spell for the witches who've kept their anger in a jar on the shelf, sealed tight, because someone once said that rage and love can't live in the same body. A spell for the ones standing at the edge of a relationship, wondering if leaving makes them less holy, less loyal, less good. I want to tell you that protecting yourself does not make you bad. It does not make you dangerous. It makes you aware. It means you are no longer willing to abandon your own peace just to keep someone else comfortable. You are no longer folding your intuition up into something palatable. You are no longer asking for permission to say no. And that, more than anything, is the sign that your power is coming home to you. Baneful magic in its truest form is not about harm, it's about honesty. It's about hard, necessary decision to name what no longer serves and to call your energy back from the places it has been left bleeding. It's the moment when your craft stops being a theory and starts becoming a boundary. It's when you stop reciting protection spells in your journal and start living them in your body, in your voice, and in your choices. Some separations are silent, they don't come with a final word or a dramatic exit. Sometimes the cord is cut with a whisper, a final moment of clarity, in a spell spoken alone in the dark. Sometimes it's not what they did, it's what they keep doing. And for me, in my case, that's what it is. Sometimes it's just a knowing. I can't keep carrying this weight and calling it love. The moment is sacred. It doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't need to be proven. You don't need to gather a list of reasons. You don't need to rehearse a speech. The knowing itself is enough. And if you're not ready to walk away yet, that's okay too. You can still work the magic. You can still shift the energy. You can start small. A name in the freezer, a ward on your door, a string tied around your wrist, holding the boundary close. Sometimes baneful work begins not with a break, but with a quiet decision to stop giving someone full access to your spirit. That's still magic, and that is still sacred. You are not here to endlessly bleed for the sake of being good. You are not here to purify yourself through pain. You are not here to let old stories dictate how much peace you're allowed to hold. You're here to reclaim your whole self, to trust what your body knows, to protect what is precious inside of you, even if that means being seen as cold, distant, or unforgiving. You don't owe anyone your forgiveness, your silence. You don't owe anyone your light if they've proven again and again they cannot meet you in it. So if this episode stirred something in you, if it made your chest heavy or your heart beat a little faster, honestly sit with that. Breathe into it. That's your magic knocking. That's your spirit saying, I'm ready. You don't need permission to cut the cord. You don't need anyone else's approval to walk away. You don't need to be at rock bottom and say, I choose myself. Because the most baneful spell you'll ever cast is the one where you finally believe you deserve to be free. So, truly, I know this was kind of a heavy one. It got a little bit more personal, but again, I really wanted to make this for someone else who might be in the same situation. Thank you for listening, wherever you are, whether you are preparing to leave, still holding on, or just learning what boundaries feel like. I hope that you have a wonderful morning, day, or night.